All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. And I'm excited this morning to be talking with Lauren Bonheim, who is the creator and the author of Lauren on Location. Lauren, thanks so much for taking the time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, we've been talking about doing this for quite some time now. I think it was earlier this year we were entertaining the idea of having you come on as a guest. But as you and I know all too well, 2020 has been a bit of a year, so plans have changed, but we're getting it in now. So I guess better late than never.
Better late than never. Yeah. 2020 has definitely been a year. So the fact that we're getting it in is, I call it a win.
Yeah, definitely. So, but, so we're going to kind of live, a little bit vicariously through some of your experiences today. I know you've covered a lot of ground as a traveler and also as an expatriate. I believe you're in Spain, but what part, if I may ask?
Yeah, I'm in Madrid, Spain right now.
Oh, wow. That's got to be lovely, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's lovelier when there's not a worldwide pandemic happening, but still lovely. Still a good place to be.
All right. Well, we'll certainly take a deeper dive into life as an expat later on, but I kind of want to go back in time a little bit here and kind of start at the beginning and just ask you, what was it that inspired you to become a world traveler in the first place?
Oof, yeah, we'll have to take it way back on that one. I guess I don't really know how to explain it. It's funny, people ask me this all the time, but it really just is something that's always been ingrained in me. And, I don't know if it comes from my parents. I'm sure they've had something to do with it, but they're huge travelers as well. And I mean, I was traveling while in my mom's belly, traveling before I could walk, basically just grew up really traveling quite often. And from the time I was a little girl, I can remember my imaginary friend. I'm an only child, so, had to get creative to keep myself occupied. And my imaginary friend's name was England, and she was from London. Go figure, very creative. And I would play with her and imagine that I was, in Europe and we were going to be going to university together at Oxford. And I just had this whole kind of adventurous life planned out for myself really from the beginning. And so I was always just kind of imagining something more and always knew that I would eventually go elsewhere. And so, yeah, I think it's just always been something that I've had inside of me. And as soon as I was able to pursue it, I went with it. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'd have to say that's a first to come up on the podcast, to be inspired to begin world travel in that way. So right on. So basically, you in England were imagining time in London. Was London and the UK perhaps very early on in your travels? Was that one of the earliest places that you went to, or where'd that fall in?
That's funny because no, it was my first big international trip was to Europe, but I was 13 at that time. And so this was way before that. And I really can't pinpoint where exactly the UK and, London in general came from. I feel like maybe that was just, one of the first places that I was learning about as this foreign land out there. I used to watch a lot of the Mary-Kate and Ashley movies with one of my good friends growing up, and they were always going on trips to these places. And so who knows, maybe that had something to do with it. But all I know is the name England, which I don't even think that's really a name, but that stuck. And I just knew Europe to me always had a pull, just as this place I knew I wanted to explore. And yeah, started from there. Me in London imagining me in England imagining our future lives in London together.
Okay, right on. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit, you've been kind of picked up this travel lifestyle from your parents, as you mentioned. They were pretty keen travelers themselves. But like, at what point later on in your life did you kind of start experiencing travel more for yourself, maybe as a solo traveler? When did that kind of fall in the timeline?
Yeah, so I studied abroad while in school, university, my junior year. And that I think was the first time that I had really, immersed myself in another culture and had gone out on my own. And so obviously I wasn't completely on my own. I was with a program and had friends and things like that, but with me. But that was the first taste I really had of what it would be like to live in another place. And that first taste, I mean, that was enough for me. And I had already started planning my move back to Europe while studying in Madrid, which Madrid is kind of my place. So that's where all of this started in a way. And I just keep getting pulled back here. But yeah, that was really the first time studying abroad. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of study abroad. I think everyone should do it if they have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
It just really like breaks you out of that box that you're living in, and gives you a new perspective on how things can be. Because, when we grow up in a certain place, end up going to school, usually somewhere nearby, and we just have kind of this one track mind for how life is supposed to be. And stepping out of that for even a short time just opens you up to like, wow, there's so many possibilities out there. This doesn't have to be, one step in front of the other path. I can kind of break out of this and do my own thing. And so, yeah, that's where that all started.
That's a really good point. And I don't think that's been brought up on the podcast before, the value of doing study abroad if someone is indeed in university right now. Because my first major international trip, believe it or not, was a study abroad.
No way.
I did a 2-week faculty-led study abroad trip to Japan during my senior year. And that was kind of the catalyst to set me down this path of travel and adventure, just because it's, and it's also a good way to do it, especially for travelers who or new and aspiring travelers who may be reluctant to do it, maybe on their own, and or might not know exactly where to go to organize everything right away, because it's all kind of organized for you. You just kind of you just enjoy the ride, so to speak. So now, but with your experience though, studying abroad in Madrid, was this for like a whole semester or just like maybe a shorter time, like 2 weeks like I did? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it was a full semester, which thinking back, I was so nervous to go because it was a full semester, but the time went by like, a blink of an eye.
As it usually does. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we have these fears around going into new experiences for, what's going to be on the other side. But really, I mean, the time went by so quickly. I was back in my comfort zone before I knew it. And it just left me wanting more. And even I think it was 3.5 months, maybe closer to 4, but that was just not enough. And that was just that first taste of it, that first experience. And I just knew I would be back as soon as I graduated and was able to take those steps, that was what was next for me. But yeah, it was a full semester. It was a good one.
All right. Right on. So what I want to ask you about next, this is a question that I like to ask all the women that come on my show, mostly because, I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of women that I have in my life. They'll hear me tell a travel story and they're fascinated by the idea of traveling and experiencing the world. But a lot of times they're, afraid to, especially to go by themselves. So I like to ask this question, because obviously I can't really give a female perspective myself, on this matter. But was safety something that you were concerned about when you decided to go out and start traveling? And if so, if I may ask, how did you kind of, deal with that, counteract that?
Yeah, it's a interesting question because I think, when I first started traveling and especially when I studied abroad, that wasn't really something I had in mind much. And who knows, maybe that's me being naive and not having, done the research beforehand or really prepared myself. But going on a program where I knew it was planned for me, I knew there would be people there to support me if I needed it. I really went into that. I mean, I had all kinds of fears around it, but I don't think safety was the big one in my mind. After leaving Spain, after living there for a few years, I moved down to South America and I actually lived in Chile for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time that I think I woke up a little bit more to the issue of traveling alone, solo as a woman. I took my first real solo trip during that time where I went to Colombia for 2 weeks, and I was completely on my own for that trip. And I have to say, though, I mean, the safety, I've never luckily been in a situation where my safety was really compromised. And I think that comes with doing some research beforehand and just making sure that you're aware of the situation in the place that you're going, especially as far as being a woman. If you're moving to a new country, being aware of what the laws are like for women there, what the situation with women's rights is, in that country.
Sure.
Because that
Yeah.
obviously, coming from the US, we're privileged in a lot of ways compared to women in other places. And so just really being aware and taking the time to look into things before traveling, but also not allowing that to hold you back. I think, and again, maybe this is me being a bit naive, but I always go into situations with trust first, with people, with places. And until I'm given a reason to not trust, I really try to go in expecting the best of my situation or the interaction, while being careful and being aware. But yeah, just trying to go in with that trust and not, right from the get-go expecting the worst is going to happen, because in that case, you've already kind of tainted your experience and you're not fully immersing yourself, if that makes sense. So that's kind of been my experience with safety. Here in Spain, I've never really found it to be an issue, but it was definitely something I was more aware of while traveling solo in South America.
Right. So what was it about Chile? Not to make it sound like that was a bad decision or anything like that. I don't know of a lot of people who talk very much about, going to places that far south in South America, especially to live. So I'm just kind of curious, what was it about the country? Because I haven't been myself, that stood out to you, that maybe made you decide that this would be a place that you'd want to settle for that length of time.
That's funny. I can't really say it was. I had lived in Spain for 2 years after graduating university. My work contract was up. I was having a hard time finding a way to live here long term. And so I moved back to the States. About 6 months after being in the States, I knew, this is not for me. I got to get out there again. And so Spanish, I had started learning Spanish while in Spain, and I knew that was something I really wanted to solidify for myself as a skill. And obviously moving down, south of the US seemed to be the next step in doing that. And yeah, I just kind of started looking for opportunities, looking for jobs, sustainable ways to be there long term. I knew it wasn't a place that I wanted to go and spend a week or 2 weeks. It's a huge continent. There's so many different cultures and countries to explore, so much just amazing nature and wildlife and, mountains and deserts. And it's crazy. But I basically just found a job in Chile. It was the first opportunity that came up. And I had never actually even been to South America before, had never taken a step on the continent. And I was just like, you know what, let's do this. Worst comes to worst, I come home if it's not what I'm looking for. I signed a 6-month contract, ended up staying for 3 years. So I guess it worked out in my favor.
All right. Right on. You make a really good point when you kind of talk about how, having an experience like, this is kind of stemming off of your time in Spain, studying abroad and living there as well, that it becomes a little bit of an adjustment to come back stateside before you decide, I need to get back out there again. It was the exact same thing for me when I had finished my Peace Corps service in West Africa. I lived there for 2 years.
Wow.
And coming back to the States, it was a heck of an adjustment, just everything from, reverse culture shock and then just trying to figure out my next thing. So I'm like, I need to get back out there again. And that's ultimately what led me to go live in the UK for a year when I decided to pursue grad school. So, and I think before too long, I might want to seek out another expat opportunity as well. So, I guess the question I kind of want to ask you, reeling off that, is maybe we can even talk about when you had wrapped up your time in Chile, coming back to the U.S. For a time. Would you find that the adjustment was maybe a little bit difficult? Maybe was reverse culture shock something that you had faced, just kind of being immersed with this different culture for that length of time and different environment entirely as well, and just trying to get readjusted to life back in the U.S. Was that a challenge, or were you able to kind of hit the ground running? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's reverse culture shock is a weird thing. It's a very strange sensation and feeling and just situation to go through, because you're coming home, I say that with my quotation marks, but you're coming home to a place where you're supposed to feel comfortable, where you're supposed to fit in, where it's supposed to be easy. And after spending time somewhere else and really immersing yourself, it's the complete opposite of that. And so, when you're outside of kind of the bubble or the box, like I call it, that you grew up in, you start to kind of see things in a different way. You are able to see where you come from outside. So the good things, the bad things, the things that you agree with, the things that you don't. And then so when you go back to that, I feel like you're a bit more critical of the situation. And there's many quotes about this, but when you come back, it's not the place that's changed, it's you. Mm-hmm. And so you're now trying to fit yourself back into this box that no longer is your perfect mold. And so, yeah, it's something I've gone through quite a few times now, and something that we'll get to this later, but something that I do help clients with as well, because it is something that can be quite an overwhelming experience if you're not prepared for it. And also if you don't have someone to support you through it, because the main feeling that comes is that feeling of loneliness, that feeling that no one at home understands you, and that, you're going through this on your own, and that no one else is ever going to get what's happening and what you've seen out there in the world. And so really just like patience, I think, is key, because it's a process, and it's something, you're going to have these waves of emotions, good things, bad things, things that feel really good, things that kind of feel sticky now that you've been outside of the situation. So just really patience. That's what I always try to do with myself. And, giving yourself grace on the good days and the bad days, whether you just need to stay in bed one day and kind of like feel sorry for yourself in the situation or push yourself to get out there and really like find the good things and the things that you love about where you come from. And yeah, it's a process. So it definitely, for me, was a difficult one. And I think ultimately helped me realize that where I come from is not where I see myself long-term, which is the Northeast of the United States. And so the reverse culture shock for me is more than reverse culture shock. I'm not saying that I don't love where I come from. I do. And I have so many people that I love and care about, and so many things that I love about where I'm from, but it's just not for me long-term. That's not where I see myself in the future. And so I think these experiences have also helped me see that. And that's totally fine as well. No place is for everyone. So
yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We had a joke in the Peace Corps that even though we only serve in the country that we're assigned to for 2 years, we say that the Peace Corps is a 4-year commitment. It takes about 1 year to apply, and it literally almost does take that long. It was easier for me to join the Marine Corps than it was for me to join the Peace Corps, if you could believe that. Yeah, and so they say 1 year to apply, 2 years of actually serving in country, and a year to get adjusted once you move back stateside. And
wow,
that was very more or less the case too, because, you're absolutely right. Having experiences like that, you don't come back the same person that you were when you left. And, sometimes, you come back and you got friends, families, loved ones that more or less expect you to come home and you just kind of just pick up like right where you left off, like as if you hadn't just slugged it out in a foreign country for, a few years. So there was a lot of difficulty with, relatability. You had a lot of experiences that or at least maybe I did. And I'll ask you this in a second, but like, they'll ask me very vague questions like, so how was Africa? And I'm like, how were the last 2 years of your life? And, or you try to, you have a fascinating story that you want to share, but you only get a couple of sentences out before they lose interest because, there's no way they could relate to you. So, but I definitely found, at least for myself, that having obviously the Peace Corps network, a lot of my cohort, they were returning at the same time I was. So, we would just stay in touch. And, if I was experiencing something, surely they were experiencing the exact same thing too. So we could kind of like, talk things out.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you were able to establish with yourself? Maybe like a post-expat network of some kind to kind of maybe like talk these things out with someone, or maybe even people back in Chile as well. Were you able to establish something like that?
Yeah. So, that's funny. That's a big part of what I do now, is helping connect people who are going through these similar situations. And I definitely think that was something I was lacking at the time. And maybe not so much lacking as, I know people who had lived abroad and come back, or, repatriated in the US, but I didn't know that it was okay to lean on them and to reach out to them and to express the feelings I was having, because, we don't usually share the hard times. We share the good things. And, when you're going through something that feels very it's just lonely and it overcomes you, it's not always the easiest to reach out and say like, hey, are you feeling this too, or is this just me? Because it does feel like such a personal thing that you're going through. I've really been trying to open up that conversation with not only the people that I work with, but friends and other people who have gone through this as well, and just becoming a support system for each other. I've met so many people throughout my travels and throughout living abroad that have such a similar mindset to me. And that has been one of my biggest takeaways, is just finding the people that think like me, because most of my friends and family from home are still at home. And again, I still have great relationships with them, but this is a piece of my life that I can't really relate completely with them on. And so having that support group of people that are going through a similar thing that you can lean on, that you can share your feelings with, definitely makes all the difference. And I've been able to find some really great people along the way who have just made it easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you bring up the point about family and friends back home. That's a really good point. The objective is certainly not to alienate the loved ones that you have in your life just because they can't relate entirely to what is you've been through, but it's just, just, I think with like any relationship that you would have with anyone, there's going to be certain things you may or may not be able to talk about. You might have to talk with someone else that could, relate to that in some way. So I do like that for sure. But what I kind of want to ask you about next is, kind of get into some of the highlights. You said you spent all this time in Spain, all this time in Chile, with a couple of places in between. And it's always tricky to ask this question just because I think as travelers, we rack up highlight experiences like it's no one's business. So it might be difficult to pick out a few. But I guess what kind of first comes to mind of like major highlights from your travel and adventure experiences?
Oof, yeah, that is a hard one. There's quite a few. But I guess, I'll pick, one that really stands out. And I have mentioned this already today, but just that first solo travel experience that I had, where I really pushed myself. And, I've moved abroad and done this and done that, but actually traveling on my own and going somewhere where I had no one else to rely on but myself. And, you know, in a new country where I had never been before, I didn't know anyone there. It was just such a great experience. And I was so freaking terrified before I went. I remember being so scared. I was obviously excited too, but I just had all these thoughts going through my head. You know, am I going to spend the whole week alone? And do I, you know, have to spend a whole week alone with myself? Oh, horror, you know, like, do I hate myself that much that I can't spend a week with myself? Or just, you know, what if I get lost? What if this happens? What if someone steals my wallet? You know, just that feeling of really being just me. And I came out on the other side of that trip with just so much more confidence, so much more trust in myself, just so much more awareness as well. And, you know, it was like one of the first times that I actually really had to spend time alone and spend time with myself. And of course, I met great people who I'm actually still in touch with. And there weren't many times where I was actually alone. But even those times where I really, you know, was able to sit with myself and get to know myself and just kind of do whatever I wanted to do in the day without having anyone else dictate my plans or, you know, insert their opinions. And it was just one of those experiences that I think everyone should have at one point in their life, whether it's a weekend trip or, you know, a longer sabbatical, whatever it is, getting out and really just doing something by yourself and not having the fear around that, but rather the excitement of what you will learn when you challenge yourself to do something like that. And yeah, even after having lived in Spain for 2 years and, you know, lived in Chile, that was like the first time where I really just felt the true impact of an experience like that, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of benefits that come from solo travel, isn't there? I mean, like you kind of alluded to, just well, for one, logistically speaking, you kind of get to move at your own pace. You get to see what you want, do what you want. You know, if you want to take a rest day, you can take a rest day or things like that. But it does allow you to, well, more or less force yourself to get resourceful when you run into issues. Like if you get lost somewhere, well, better not, you know, break down and start weeping about it, because you got to get yourself back to, you know, your hostel or your hotel. So you best buckle up and figure this out, you know. But, you know, you mentioned earlier that, you know, a lot of times we like to share a lot of the highlights, you know, especially with maybe other people in our network. But, you know, let's face it, we do face some challenges in the realm of travel too. And, you know, I think any traveler has probably a few misadventures or embarrassing moments up their sleeves. So if I may, I'd like to ask you the same. What were some misadventures that you can recall from your travels?
Oh man, there's just too many. Just maybe even more than highlights. But yeah, I really try to find the learning experience or just the funny part of it afterwards. And even when I'm in the middle of whatever's happening, reminding myself, this is something I'll laugh about one day in the future, just get through it. I guess I'll share a little bit more of a funny one that happened kind of recently, actually just earlier this year. And so I've mentioned that I'm learning Spanish. And so I speak pretty conversationally right now, but I'm still always trying to improve. And I'm in Spanish classes here in Spain. And so I have kind of a weird mix of Spanish going on in my head, considering I've lived in Spain where it's very much more, you know, the traditional Castilian Spanish. Went to Chile, where it's pretty widely known that Chile has like the worst Spanish possible in the world. They have their own slang, their own. I mean, I got there, and after a semester studying in Spain and 2 years living in Spain, I could hardly order myself a taxi from the airport. That's how crazy it is. And now my boyfriend is Venezuelan, and I also have quite a few Venezuelan friends. And so there's kind of, each place has their own dialect, their own words, their own slang, their own way of saying things. And you got to be careful because it can get you into some sticky situations. one that stands out to me recently was with my Spanish teacher. We were talking about something, and I can't remember how we got on the topic, but basically I was telling her that something that my boyfriend was doing was annoying me. And in Venezuelan Spanish, they use the word la dia for this, la dia. Like me da la dia. I don't want to do it, or it makes me annoyed, or, I don't have the motivation to do something. Here in Spain, la dia means pubic crabs. And so I literally told my Spanish teacher that my boyfriend gave me pubic crabs in one of our lessons. And she's just looking at me like blank faced. And I'm thinking, why is this woman looking at me like this? What just happened? And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, what he's doing is annoying me. Like, I don't know what it was, but I don't know. I don't want to take the garbage out. Like, me la vida. Like, I don't want to do that. And she's just looking at me. Are you okay? I'm like, why is this woman taking this so seriously? And eventually we got to the point where there was a miscommunication. But yeah, that was a pretty funny moment. We were both able to laugh about it afterwards, but that definitely sticks out in my mind recently, because I'm like, okay, I got to focus on who I'm talking to and pull that Spanish out. Like, am I talking to a group of Venezuelans, a group of Chileans? There are things that really mean different. The context is everything. So yeah.
So you just had to like switch Spanish modes on the fly like that, basically. So, we're in Venezuela, switch to Venezuelan Spanish.
Yeah, it's funny. And thankfully I've gotten to the point now where I can kind of switch depending on who I'm talking to, and just keeping that in mind. Because, when I speak to my Chilean friends, over FaceTime or WhatsApp or whatever it is, my boyfriend's always laughing at me because I just slip right back into that really intense Chilean slang and their kind of more animated way of talking about things. And Venezuelans use a lot more like onomatopoeia, like they'll be telling a story and it's like, and then I closed the door, and then I went to the fridge, bacha, and then I ate. And it's like they're constantly talking with these like sound words. So yeah, it's funny, just kind of keeping in mind who I'm talking to so I don't get myself in any sticky situations like that one.
Oh, that's great. That's definitely a first of its kind to come up on this podcast, Lauren. I love it. That's so funny. All right. So what I kind of want to ask you about next is, your current stint as an expat in Spain, which, by the way, when did you actually make the move back out to Spain this time around?
So I just got back here at the end of January. So really, right before the shit hit the fan, I guess.
Yeah.
I was only here for about a month before, things in Spain escalated really fast. This was one of the first places after Italy and China that things really kind of took off in the wrong direction. And yeah, we were still moving in. I mean, still didn't have all of our furniture and everything yet, and went into a really strict lockdown where we weren't even allowed out of the house. And so, yeah, I've been here for about 9 months now this time around. And it's been quite a year, a year to move back abroad.
Yeah, that would be putting it mildly. That's for sure. But like moving out there though, because so far in this conversation, it almost kind of makes it seem like you and I just kind of picked up and just went, to these places that we decided to live abroad. But it's not quite as straightforward as that. It's a little bit of a process. So can you kind of take us through some of the like logistical measures that it took in order for you to actually make this move to Spain? You probably had to get like some paperwork, a few other things, there's some legal matters that you have to take care of. So can you kind of take us in a little bit to share how that was done?
Yeah. So, I won't bore all of you with the, the like nitty gritty details of it, but definitely, especially from the US, if you're wanting to move to Europe, there's a lot that goes into it. And what I always like to tell people is if it's something that you really want and you're really committed to, you will find a way to make it happen. And there's all different types of ways that you can make a life in another place sustainably, but you often have to get creative. And so I'm actually here on a student visa right now. Mentioned I'm taking Spanish classes as well. And so I'm in the process of applying for German citizenship, which, especially with everything going on right now, has really been prolonged, I guess, the process.
Right.
And so that's something that I'm hoping will come to life soon. That will definitely clear up quite a lot of legal, I guess, I don't want to say issues, but legal points around me living here in Europe long term. But yeah, there's always a way. I mean, I have friends here who have started businesses in Spain, are freelancing here in Spain. If it's something that you really want, I mean, I always suggest, first studying in the place and seeing if you even like it, seeing if it is a place for you. And then there's always ways once you're there to really explore what it would be like to live somewhere long term. And so for me, yeah, right now I'm studying here while also running my business on the side. And that is kind of how I got here this time around. In Chile, I was on a work contract. I was working for a startup down there. And so I taught English there for a year. And then again, you can teach English. That's a great way to get somewhere if you are a native English speaker as kind of a gateway to a new place. That's often how people start living abroad. It's definitely not the only way, but for me personally, that was kind of how I got my foot in the door in these places. And then once being here, meeting other people who had made it work, learning the other ways to get a visa to live somewhere legally, and then pursuing those paths also helped as well. And so there's always a way. It really just depends on your mindset and how committed you are to making it work. And if it's something you really want, there's a way to make it happen. So
Yeah. And I think kind of going along with that is, if someone's committed to, living abroad, just be willing to go through the process, because sometimes it seems, in the Marine Corps, we like to say, hurry up and wait, because it's like you do everything on your end, but then you submit all this stuff and you're waiting for people on their end to, sort everything out. And it does seem a little bit discouraging at times. I remember when I had to apply for my student visa to go to England, and having to prepare the documents, making sure they were spot on, and then sending them in, getting them back. And I don't know about what your student visa situation was like to go to Spain, but at least my student visa involved taking up an entire page on my passport. So you got to be, have that open as well if you travel a lot. But once you're actually living there and then you go through that experience and you can recall on the experience, all that preparatory stuff, it just seems like a blip. It's something that you will hardly, really recall upon, just because everything else kind of just takes over. At least that's been my experience. I'm assuming that's been your experience too, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, and I tell people this, it's obviously looking through pictures on Instagram and seeing everyone's lavish life abroad, and all of the like sangria and siestas and sitting on terraces just without a care in the world. I mean, I don't want to say there's a price to get there, but you often have to work hard to get to that place. And so there's a lot behind the scenes that we often don't put out there for everyone to see. And it's this life that I've chosen of living abroad and moving around the world quite often. It comes with some hard work, and you have to be willing to put in the work in order to get what's on the other side. But it's not like you just blink your eyes one day and are all of a sudden living the dream, and that's okay. I mean, most things in life that are worth having take some work to get there. A lot of what I've been working on with my clients recently is, like, if we worked half as hard for the things that we actually want as for the things that we should want, or the things that we're, putting all of our time and energy into, like the job that doesn't make us happy, or, the relationship that's not actually good for us. And if we channeled that energy into something that we actually cared about and, put the work there, we would already be so far, ahead on where we want to be and well on our way. And so it's really just focusing our priorities on the things that really light us up. And I mean, you just pointed to your phone, instead of spending hours scrolling through Instagram and being jealous or having a grudge against the girl who's out there doing it, like, do it, do it yourself. I mean, you're just wasting time holding a grudge against someone who got out there and did it when you could be taking the steps to get there. So, I mean, all about priorities,
Yeah, definitely. And well, the reason why I was pointing to my phone, you just made me think of something. I think a lot of times, we may have a tendency to do the comparison trap, right? Where we, like you mentioned, we'll see certain accounts on Instagram and, we'll get angry and envious and we'll just keep scrolling and looking at more and more and more and we get more and more angry. But I'm like, if we channel that same amount of energy and that time, which is a critical resource to making things like that happen, then we can actually go do it. Because ultimately at the end, I mean, you and I are kind of sharing like our experiences here, but it's like, these are our stories, and it's not, no one should want to seek to replicate my story or your story or anyone's story. It's like, that's the beautiful thing about being your own character in this world, is that you get to write your own. So
absolutely. I'm such a big proponent of that as well, because I mean, when we try to fit ourselves into someone else's box or someone else's path, it's never going to feel quite right because it's not our own. It's not something that we created for ourselves. And, social media, it's funny because that's something, I mean, I conduct a lot of my business through social media. It seems as though I spend my life on social media, but really I have strict limits for myself as for how much time I spend there. And I'm very happy with the situation I'm in right now, but that doesn't mean that scrolling through Instagram, I'm not going to see someone else who has something that maybe I want that don't have yet. And, it's a dangerous game, the comparison game, because it really doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us in kind of this overthinking cycle of getting down on ourselves. And just really, like you said, paving your own path, putting up the blinders for a little while and just not letting other people's experiences or stories get to you, and just focusing in on like, okay, what do I want? That's what's important. What's best for me? All this other noise and crap that's out there doesn't matter, because that's not what's going to make me happy. There's no one size fits all roadmap to life. We're all just figuring it out.
Yeah. I definitely, I too also take a pretty careful approach to social media, because I mean, you're right. It certainly does have its pros and cons. I mean, you and I got connected through social media, and now this conversation is happening. But it's just. But I use like Instagram has like this like timer where you just basically it lets you know if you've been on too long, and I'm like, okay, all right, there. And also for anyone listening, never start your mornings with social media. Do not let the first thing you do when you roll out of bed is pick up your phone and scroll through social media. That is your morning time is your time. Don't spend your morning time, scrolling through other people's lives. Okay. Yeah. It's your time. So anyway, I'm sorry. I just I got off a little bit of it.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Awesome. So, you mentioned that you had moved to Spain earlier this year, and then suddenly, things happened as they did. But I guess what's it been like? Kind of just adjusting to Spain. I mean, I imagine that you haven't really had maybe too much chance to get out there and explore, get acquainted with your country, your new country now. So, or then again, maybe you have. I mean, maybe things have been shaping up a little bit. I mean, what's it been like so far this year with just getting adjusted to being an expat again?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because since I have lived here before, I really do know Spain, but I also don't know Spain. There's just so much here to see and do and learn. And really kind of what this year has forced me to do and also opened up an opportunity. I'm always looking for the opportunity in whatever's happening. And so obviously a worldwide pandemic isn't a opportunity, but, you know, finding, okay, well, what can we take from this experience and come out on the other side feeling good about? And what it's really helped us do here is get to know Spain. I mean, my boyfriend and I have been doing road trips, well, you know, after the really strict quarantine, but traveling in a way where we're not taking public transportation or, you know, exposing ourselves, but just hopping in the car and going to visit these cities outside of Madrid that I probably never would have taken the time, unfortunately, to explore before. Because in Europe, it's so easy to just hop on a plane and jet set your way to another country for a weekend. And instead of really getting to know the place that I'm living, using that opportunity, which is also great, but really getting to know Spain this year has been something that I will definitely take with me from 2020, and exploring these smaller cities in the north that I had never even heard the name of them before, but now they're some of my favorite places here that I know I'll go back to. And, you know, just really kind of getting out of our comfort zone in a way, because Madrid for me is like home. I've lived here before. I know the city pretty well. Obviously, there's always more to see and explore, but taking the opportunity to kind of, just get out of Madrid, but visit these places that I wouldn't have gone to before. And then as far as, you know, adjusting to expat life, it's been an interesting adjustment, because really the first 4 or 5 months that I was here, I was just home. So we weren't able to go out. I have a grocery store less than a minute walk from my house. And so really my radius was like a 2-kilometer little circle of life, which in a way, I guess, gave me plenty of time to adjust, but also I was living in my little bubble of home comfort without having to actually adjust to life in Spain. So in a way, it's given me more time, but it's also kind of like delayed the process a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got what you mean. Well, how much longer will you be living in Spain? How much is the student visa going on for?
So I just got approved for another year
Nice.
of my visa. So yeah, I mean, everything's really backed up with Corona right now, and the offices opening up again. You know, there were 4 or 5 months of appointments that they had to catch up on. And so I was approved, but now I'm just waiting for the process of, you know, actually going and getting the visa stamped and all that jazz, all that admin stuff that comes with living in another country. But, you know, I'm hoping that in the process of extending my student visa, that something will happen with the German citizenship. We don't know. I'll take it as it comes, one step at a time. And yeah, you know, I really don't know how long we'll be here in Spain. I know I'll always find my way back here, but this time around, you know, we're feeling it out. We'll see, however long feels right. And when that itch comes back and things open up and we are able to go somewhere else, who knows?
Well, at least you know you've been approved for another year. Now it's just the hurry up and wait period that I've talked about to actually get all the paperwork. So, but at least you got some good news, and you bought yourself some breathing room till, you know, the German citizenship clears up. So right on. All right. So now, this podcast that I like to do is, you know, a good mix of, you know, travel and self-development, because as we talked about, you know, there's a lot that you can gain that helps you grow as a person through travel. And we kind of, you know, hinted at a couple of them here and there throughout this conversation. But, you know, just to kind of dial things in a little bit now with you is, you know, what are some life lessons? What are some, you know, big takeaways that you've kind of picked up from your travels and adventures that you've been able to implement into your own life? And again, I know that's another one of those loaded questions, because, you know, there could be a lot of them, but I guess I'll just ask just to say what, you know, comes to mind.
You know, again, just so many lessons to share, but I think the one that really sticks out to me right now, especially with everything that's going on this year, is, I know you said, you know, hurry up and wait, but don't wait. Don't get stuck waiting. Don't get stuck dreaming. Don't get stuck comfy in your comfort zone. You know, we really only have one life to live on this earth. And I know that sounds so cliche, but if everyone was living as if they only had one life, there would be a lot of changes going on, because we act like we have all the time in the world to get to these things later, put them off now. They're not, my dreams aren't going anywhere. But I mean, if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that nothing is a guarantee. And there's really no reason to wait. If there's something that you want that you don't yet have, take the steps to get it, and start taking steps, even if you can't see the full path and the full, roadmap laid out before you. If you know where you're going, you can start taking steps in that direction, and the rest will fall into place. But this dangerous cycle of waiting, or telling ourselves that we can get there later, that we'll enjoy, I mean, that's something that we learn in the US, especially in the Northeast, is we're taught to save and plan and just keep getting ourselves ready for this arbitrary future, saving for retirement, climbing the corporate ladder. It's we're in this cycle of waiting to enjoy life, and we're told that we have to put in the hard work now in order to later arrive. And I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be putting hard work in. I'm just saying, I screw that. I'm not waiting for later. I want to enjoy myself now. Like, I want to live my life today. Why do I have to wait for tomorrow? And so, yeah, my biggest lesson would just be to start making things happen. I mean, no one else is going to make your dreams happen for you. So if you're not going to do it, they're not coming to your reality. I'm sorry. That's just how life goes.
Right. Yeah. You just made me think of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. Have you read that book by chance?
I haven't, but it's on my never-ending list of books to read.
Okay. Well, I won't spoil too much of the book, but I'll just kind of give you this little blip. He has a segment in the book where he talks about mini retirements, because he brings up the issue of constantly climbing the corporate ladder, just grinding and grinding and grinding, all the time, where you're almost neglecting pretty much everything, else in your life, with that ambition of just waiting for retirement at the end. But he kind of talked about the downside of doing it that way is, if you wait until retirement, after a long career, the best years of your life have already passed you by. Like, your youthful years are the time to go out and explore. That's where your energy, your physical capabilities and stuff like that kind of lie in. So he talks about doing mini retirements, where you work for a good while, you save up, you take 3 months, go travel, live somewhere else, come back, and just do it again. And he talks about putting fuel stabilizer in your car and putting your car up on jack stands, so he goes over all that admin and logistical stuff too. But I mean, I just found that really valuable, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we get one shot at this thing. I mean, the countdown's ticking right now. It's you're going to run out of time. I know that's a morbid thought to think about, but it's really just solid fact. I mean, we're all going to, bite the dust at some point in time. I mean, hopefully much later down the line, of course, but it's bound to happen. Yeah. So I appreciate that, because it's definitely very valuable. And I think it's something that more people should take in consideration, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know you said it's a morbid thought, and it is, but we can take it in a way that it's oh my God, my days are limited, or my days are limited. I'm going to get out there and enjoy myself and live my life. And like you said, we only have one shot at this thing. So if we're waiting and putting it off, I mean, what are we waiting for? The second chance? I mean, again, it sounds morbid, but you never know what's coming tomorrow. And if we just keep putting things off for tomorrow, that tomorrow may never come. So why not start living the life you want to live today and start taking steps in that direction? I mean, what do you have to lose really when you think about it? What's scarier, getting started and taking steps into the unknown and kind of an unpredictable future, or staying put and never knowing? I mean, really, it's kind of just weighing out which really is scarier to you, and then committing to one.
Right. Yeah. And I think what kind of gets in a lot of people's way there is, fear of a lot of things, I'd say, and it could be on big scale items to small scale items, like, asking your boss for, a raise that you think you deserve. There's a lot of fear of rejection and things like that though too. Or if you see someone that you're interested in, you want to go talk to them, ask them out or something, there's the fear of rejection there as well. But, I always just say, just go for it, because if you fail, you learn. Then you can go in the situation again with a new perspective on things, a new way of going about certain things. So at least that's one of the things I live by, is like, you fail, and you learn. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I saw an interesting quote the other day that said, I can't miss out on something that wasn't meant for me. And so that fear of rejection or fear of failure, I mean, if something's not happening for you, there's a reason that probably won't come to you until later, but there is a reason. And often it's because that thing isn't for you. Maybe the job really isn't for you because there's something else better coming down the line. That person that rejects you, that's not the person you're supposed to be with.
Right.
And that, and so you can't miss out on something that's not meant for you. And if you have that mentality when you're going about your life, I mean, your whole concept of failure is really redefined, because in that case, failure isn't getting something wrong, or it's not being rejected. It's never even starting or never even trying. Because if you don't try, you can't fail. But really, I mean, then aren't you already failing if you haven't even put yourself out there and you haven't tried?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Right on. Very cool. All right. Well, we're kind of getting close to the end of our time, but what I want to ask you to share with us next is, tell us a little bit about your blog. And I know this past year, you've really been working on providing coaching services as well. And, we've hinted at it a little bit throughout this conversation, but let's take a deeper dive now. Fill us in a little bit more on, your blog and the coaching services that you're offering.
Yeah. So I started my blog years ago, I guess, a year after I first moved abroad. And it was really kind of just my safe place to write at that time. Blogs weren't really, some people were starting with monetizing blogs and things like that, but it wasn't the craze that it is today of everyone, trying to monetize a website. It was more just a hobby for me. I wanted to share my travels with people back home. Lots of people were reaching out to me when they were coming to Spain. And so I figured, instead of rewriting an email every time with all of my recommendations, I could just start putting it out there so more people could use it if they found it interesting. And I eventually started using it to really grow my skills in digital marketing, SEO, social media, those things, because I was teaching English at the time. And so I knew that teaching English wasn't a long-term game for me. It was just a way to pay the bills at the time, a way to live in another country. But I knew that, there was something more out there for me. And so that was kind of my way to stay sharp in that world of digital marketing. And it started growing. It really, people started reaching out to me about the articles, reaching out about more advice about traveling to Spain, about moving abroad. And with time, it really just morphed into, I had no idea that it would have gone where it's brought me today. And so that's what I mean by just taking these small steps towards something, because the rest really does fall into place. And I never would have thought that I would be, generating some kind of income from my blog. That just came naturally in a way. And then even, the fact that I was starting to connect with so many people who found what I was doing interesting and wanting to know how I had done it and needing help. And that's how I really got into coaching, because I realized that I was spending so much of my time helping people with these things. And that was the time during my day that I was the happiest and the time that I felt the most fulfilled. And I realized that it was something bigger than me. My personal mission is just to be true to myself and to fall unconditionally head over heels in love with my life. And that I always have in the forefront. What's the next step? Does it support that mission? And it's really expanded over time to not only be for me, but to help others do the same. And so it all comes back to this concept of only having that one life to live. And so inspiring, helping, supporting others to really fall in love with their lives. Because if we're not loving ourselves and we're not loving our life, what else is there? It all starts there. And so this journey for me, I am just not the same person that I was 6 years ago. And the personal development and growth and transformation that I've gone through has just been so crazy. And my now new mission is to help other people experience that, to help other people get to the other side and really just gain the confidence and, learn the mindset and the different shifts that can happen to just get started on that path. And yeah, so that's really how the coaching evolved. It was just a very natural process that just happened over time.
All right, right on. And so if we wanted to reach out and connect with you to, hire you for your coaching services, how can we do that?
Yeah, so the best place to reach me is Instagram. Lauren on Location is my Instagram handle. That's like my little online persona, I guess, as you could call it. And so I do spend limited time on Instagram, but I do check it every day. That's where I love connecting with people. I mean, that's where we connected. I've really tried to shift and use that platform to just connect and network with like-minded people, to grow relationships. And that shift has really just made social media so much less toxic and just, a healthier channel for me. And so I'm always looking to connect with others, other travelers, other expats, anyone who feels like they might need some support or help around these things. And so, yeah, Lauren on Location, you can find me on Instagram there. My website as well is laurenonlocation.com. And so anything with Lauren on Location, that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, right on. Well, to make it nice and convenient for our listeners, they can find links to, all of those in the show notes for this episode, so they can find them there. All right. So what I have for you next, getting to the wrap up of our conversation, is I always ask my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners because, we're sharing some good information in this episode. And, we're talking about some good motivational and inspirational stuff, but that only really means so much. Or it can only take someone so far, rather. They have to follow it up with action. We've been talking about the importance of just taking action and getting after it. So what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
Yeah, wow. So I guess I'm going to sneak in 2 challenges there.
Go for it.
They're around the same thing, but, I've been talking to so many people this year who are just feeling so stuck with everything that's going on and, unmotivated, just overwhelmed. They're not really sure how to move forward. And so something that I've really been challenging people to do is take their focus off of the things that are outside of their control, the things that they can't control, and rather focusing in on the things that they can control. Because if we put all of our time and energy into the things that we can't control, basically it's just a waste because we're just getting overwhelmed. We're not moving forward with anything and we're just focusing on things that we can't change. And so what I would challenge whoever's listening to do is to focus on the things that you can control. What are the things in your life that today, right now, you have control over that you can start making changes in a way that's best for you? So first of all, just focusing on what is in my control right now. And then the second challenge is to ask yourself, what is a step that I can take today? So not tomorrow, not next week, a step that I can take today to better one of these things that is in my control. Because yeah, it's just, really that's all we can do is focus on those things that we do have control over. And so first figuring out what those things are. And then second, what is one step that I can take today in the direction of where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, in doing so, you can also probably find something that you probably didn't think you needed to do for yourself, but then you actually do it. Good example for me is, when all the gyms kind of started closing, when all this was going down, I started implementing yoga more into my life. And then I just realized God dang, I am stiff as a board. I cannot believe I was neglecting, mobility and flexibility work this whole time. And so now I feel just a heck of a lot better because I was more or less, had to stay home and just kind of just do that for myself. So, and sometimes, when things happen, there's a lot of opportunities to be seen there that you probably didn't even know were there beforehand until you've been willing to actually step in there.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
So right on. Okay, so what I have for you next is my final three. These are three, I like to think that they're really fun questions, but I guess that could be subjective. But all my guests get asked these questions at the end of the show, so you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of those questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Oof. I have to say Spain. I just have to. I mean, this isn't a place that I've been. It's a place that I call home. But Spain for me, it's my happy place.
All right. Very good. And the next question, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Oof. I have a never-ending bucket list.
And it just keeps getting longer, doesn't it?
It keeps getting longer every day. I guess I'll have to say going to Venezuela. That is a trip that I was supposed to take this past summer, actually last month in August, and for obvious reasons didn't happen. But it's always been a place that has really spoken to me. My boyfriend's from Venezuela. I have a lot of friends and people that I love from the country. And so, I know the situation there is complicated right now as well, but I know that one day I will get there, and it is like one of the top 3 bucket list items that I have right now. So I'm keeping it in the forefront. I know that one day soon I'm going to make it happen.
All right, right on. And the last question, and this is a 2-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
Ooh, okay. So that one's actually kind of hard because my favorite animal is a dog. Dogs are literally, if you were to open my Instagram right now and scroll through my Explore page, it's embarrassing because you will not see anything other than dogs. You would think it would be travel. You would think it would be personal development. It's dogs. They make me happy. I like them more than I like most people. That's just, they are my spirit animal, I guess you could say. So that being said, I don't know if I've seen dogs in the wild. I see them anytime I can, but unfortunately in America, there are quite a few stray dogs. There used to be a few that lived outside of the building I lived in, and I would like bring them snacks and, speak to them, I guess, or, play with them every morning, even though you're not supposed to pet the stray dogs. So I don't know if that counts as dogs in the wild, but it felt kind of like it for me.
Yeah, we'll go with it this time. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. Let's go with that. All right, awesome. All right, well, Lauren, before we close out here, let's just recap again really quick where our listeners can go and connect with you. So websites, social media handles, where are you out there in the internet space?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on Instagram at Lauren on Location. And then if you are interested in checking out my blog, my website, laurenonlocation.com.
All right. And as I've mentioned, I will get all those linked up in the show notes so listeners can go and find them there. Well, Lauren, I tell you what, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. I know this has been a conversation that's been months in the work, but I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. Again, I know you've got a lot going on in your neck of the woods, but I just really appreciate you being here and sharing all this with myself and the listeners. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, likewise. Right on.